The autumn of 2008 in Cincinnati smelled like wood smoke and betrayal. I was in the kitchen of our little brick house on Maple Street, stirring chili for supper, when the front door slammed so hard the crucifix above it jumped on its nail. I wiped my hands on the apron I had worn since 1965 and walked slow into the living room, my slippers whispering across the same hardwood my late husband, Robert, had sanded by hand. There she stood, Sarah Elizabeth Harper, 29 years old, blonde hair twisted up like she was going to some gala instead of ripping her family in half. Lipstick the color of fresh blood. A cream trench coat I had never seen before. Designer. No doubt paid for by the man idling in the driveway with his BMW engine purring like a satisfied cat. Daniel, my only child, stood frozen near the couch with our grandson Matthew clinging to his leg. Matthew was 5. All big brown eyes and sticky fingers from the cookies I had just pulled out of the oven. He knew something was wrong. Children smell fear the way dogs smell storms. Sarah did not even look at the boy at first. She was busy checking her reflection in the black screen of the television, smoothing an eyebrow, adjusting the gold hoop earrings that caught the lamplight like tiny knives. Daniel's voice cracked the air. Sarah, talk to me. Whatever it is, we can fix it. She turned then, slow, like an actress who knew the camera loved her profile. A smile, small and pitying, curved those painted lips. Daniel, honey, she said, voice sugary enough to rot teeth. Some things are not meant to be fixed. They are meant to be free. I felt my stomach drop straight through the floorboards. Matthew tugged on his daddy's jeans. Mommy, are we going on a trip? Quote. Sarah finally glanced down. For one heartbeat I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt maybe, love maybe, but it vanished faster than a match in the wind. She crouched, silk coat brushing the carpet, and patted Matthew's cheek with the same hand that wore the diamond tennis bracelet none of us could afford. Mommy has to go somewhere very important. Baby, she cooed. You be good for Daddy and Grandma. Okay? I will send you pretty presents. Presents. As if postcards from Aruba could replace a mother's heartbeat under a child's ear at night. Daniel took one step forward, arms out like he could still catch her. Sarah, please. He is 5. He needs you. I need you. She straightened, brushing imaginary lint from her sleeve. Daniel, let's not do an ugly scene in front of Matthew. You knew I was unhappy. I stayed as long as I could. As long as you could? Daniel's words came out strangled. We have a son. Vows. A home. Stop. I am not the villain here. I am just a woman who finally chose herself. I could not stay quiet any longer. Sarah Harper, I said. You look your child in the eye and tell him why his mother is walking out that door with another man's stink still on her skin. Her mask slipped for the first time. Color flooded her cheeks. Anger, not shame. Stay out of this, Evelyn. This is between me and Daniel. No, I told her. This is between you and that little boy who is about to learn that love can lie. Matthew started crying then, big hiccuping sobs that tore the lining out of my heart. He reached for her with both arms. Mommy, do not go. I will be good. I promise. I will eat all my peas. Quote, she hugged him quick and hard. I will call, she said. And then she walked out. Silence fell so heavy I could hear the chili bubbling over onto the stove. She is really gone, he whispered into the dark. Yes, I said. And we are still here. But that was only the first crack in the foundation of our lives. The real earthquake was still coming. 25 years slipped by like water through a cracked cup after Sarah left. Daniel never brought another woman into that house on Maple Street. He said once, quiet, over coffee at 2 a.m. Mama, I can live without being loved again. I can't live through watching Matthew lose another mother. So he poured every spare minute into that boy. And into the construction company he started with nothing but a second-hand pickup and a loan I co-signed with trembling hands. Matthew grew tall and quiet, brown eyes always watching, always measuring. He learned early that love could vanish in the time it took a BMW to turn the corner. He never asked for Sarah after age 7. The few times she sent postcards from Miami or Santorini, glossy beaches, fake promises, he handed them to me unopened. I burned them in the fireplace and told him the smoke carried away things that no longer belonged to us. By the time Matthew was 24, he had taken his daddy's little company and turned it into Harper & Son Developments, one of the fastest growing firms in the Midwest. He could read a balance sheet like poets read sonnets. Investors chased him. Magazines put his face on covers. The boy who built an empire before 30. But every night he came home to Maple Street, kicked off his Italian loafers, and sat on the floor playing gin rummy with an old woman who still wore the same apron. He was 29 in the spring of 2033 when he met her. Her name was Lauren Whitmore. 27. Auburn hair that caught the sun like fire. Laugh like champagne bubbles. She was an interior designer we hired for a luxury condo tower in downtown Cincinnati. I met her the day she walked into Matthew's office wearing a white linen dress and confidence that filled the room before she ever spoke. I didn't like her from the first handshake. Too smooth, too many perfect teeth. But Matthew, my guarded, careful boy, looked at her like the sun had finally come out after a lifetime of night. 3 months later he brought her to Sunday dinner. She kissed my cheek with lips that left a waxy red print. Called me Mrs. Harper in a voice sweet enough to gag a bee. She admired the old photos on the mantel, cooed over baby pictures of Matthew, told me I had such a charming little home. Charming little home. Like we lived in a dollhouse instead of the place 3 generations had bled and cried and laughed in. But Matthew was glowing. For the first time since he was 5 years old, he looked hopeful. They married 6 months later in a cathedral that cost more than my entire wedding reception and honeymoon combined. I sat in the front pew in a navy dress I'd worn to 3 funerals, clutching my purse so hard the fake pearls left dents in my palms. When the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," Matthew looked at Lauren like she was the answer to every prayer he'd never dared say out loud. I smiled for the photographs. I toasted with champagne that tasted like regret. And when they left for their honeymoon in Bora Bora, I went home, sat in my rocker, and prayed to a God who had ignored most of my pleas for the last half-century. The first year was fairy tale perfect. Or so the Instagram pictures claimed. Lauren redecorated their new penthouse overlooking the Ohio River. She threw parties where champagne flowed and women wore dresses that cost more than Daniel made in a month when he started out. Matthew bought her a diamond the size of a nickel and a Mercedes the color of fresh cream. Then came the pregnancy. Little Robert Daniel Harper was born on a snowy February morning in 2034. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and his daddy's serious brown eyes. Matthew carried that baby around like he was made of glass and gold. He moved us all into a bigger house in Indian Hill so I could have a suite on the ground floor and be close to my first great-grandbaby. He hired nurses, nannies, whatever Lauren wanted. Lauren held Robert exactly twice in front of me. Once for the hospital photo. Once at the christening. After that, she handed him off like a purse she'd tired of carrying. I watched the light in Matthew's eyes begin to dim again. Slow. The way a candle gutters before it goes out. By the time Robert was 18 months old, Lauren was bored. She wanted St. Barth's for Christmas. Not Cincinnati snow. She wanted girls' trips to Tulum and Dubai. She wanted a husband who didn't come home smelling like job sites and baby formula. One Tuesday in August 2034. Matthew came home early from a site visit. I was in the kitchen pureeing peas for Robert when I heard the scream. Not loud, just sharp, like glass breaking inside a heart. I found Matthew in the marble foyer, on his knees again, same as his daddy 26 years earlier. Only this time he was 31. And the little boy clinging to his leg was his own son. Lauren stood over him in a silk robe, suitcase already by the door. A black Range Rover idled outside. Driver this time, not lover, but the difference felt academic. I'm suffocating. Matthew, she said, voice calm, rehearsed. I was 27 when we got married. I'm not ready to be somebody's old lady in the suburbs. Matthew's voice came out raw. We have a child, Lauren. A son. She shrugged. Actually shrugged. You wanted him more than I did. You'll be a wonderful father. Single fatherhood looks good on powerful men these days. Robert started crying. Confused. Reaching for the mother who had never quite reached back. Lauren looked at the toddler for a long second. Then she bent, kissed the top of Robert's curls and said, Mommy will FaceTime. Baby, be good. She walked out. The door closed. The Range Rover purred away. Matthew didn't move for hours. He sat on the cold marble holding Robert until the baby fell asleep against his chest. I stood in the doorway, 81 years old, watching my grandson's heartbreak in the exact same shape his father's had. History doesn't repeat itself, darling. It just puts on a new dress and fresher lipstick. 6 days later Matthew died of a massive heart attack. The doctors said stress, grief, genetics. I say 2 women walked out on him before his heart could take a third beating. Robert, 19 months old, stood in his crib calling Dada for weeks afterward. Reader, if you've ever buried your child, you know the order of the world reverses. But the story doesn't end in that grave. Because I was still breathing. And that little boy needed arms that would never let go. Turn the page with me, darlin'. The worst is over. Now comes the slow, stubborn miracle. They buried my Matthew on a Tuesday in September, under a sky so blue it felt like an insult. The cemetery on Salem Road was packed. Hundreds came. Construction crews in clean shirts. Bankers in Armani. Politicians who'd never returned his calls when he was alive. They all wanted to shake my hand. Tell me what a visionary he'd been. I let them. I smiled the smile of a woman who has nothing left to lose and everything left to protect. Little Robert stood beside me in a tiny navy suit, clutching the stuffed giraffe Matthew had bought him the week before he died. He was 19 months old and didn't understand why everyone was crying. Only that his daddy wasn't coming back to push him on the swing anymore. When they lowered the casket, Robert looked up at me with those serious brown eyes and asked, "Clear as morning, Dada sleeping?" Quote, I picked him up, pressed his face into my neck so he wouldn't see the dirt hit the wood, and answered, "Yes, baby. Daddy's sleeping very deep, but he's watching us, and he's so proud of you." That was the first lie I ever told him. There have been many since, all of them wrapped in love. The will reading was 2 days later. Matthew had updated it 6 months after Robert was born. Everything went into an ironclad trust for my grandson, with me as sole trustee. Lauren didn't even show up. Her lawyer sent a letter renouncing any claim. Translation: she'd already found a wealthier widow. I sold the big house the same week. Too many echoes. I moved us back to Maple Street. People said I was crazy. Evelyn, you're 81. You could rest. Rest? The day I rest is the day they put me in the ground next to my boy. So I turned that house into a fortress of love. I hired the best tutors. I balanced the company books at midnight. Board members tried to push me out. I reminded them my grandson owned the company. They listened. Robert grew like a miracle. By 4 he read newspapers. By 7 he sat in board meetings. But at night, he cried in closets. He blamed himself. I held him and told him the truth. None of it was his fault. By 21 he was a billionaire. But he never let anyone love him. At night he laid his head on my lap and asked if he was broken. I told him he was a fortress. Then came the winter I fell. My hip broke. Robert refused to send me away. And then Clara walked into our lives. Young, kind, honest, not afraid of money or power. She held my hand and said she was here for love, not wealth. And for the first time in years, I saw my grandson's walls begin to crack. And that, my darling, is where the real story begins. Reader, are you still with me? The pain is mostly behind us now. Ahead lie the sparks, the storms, the slow, impossible blooming. The first thing you need to know is that Robert Harper does not lose his temper. He calculates it, weaponizes it, freezes entire boardrooms with one lifted eyebrow. Anger, for him, is a currency he spends only when the return is guaranteed. So when he roared that first time, really roared, the whole house shook like the day Jesus cleared the temple. It was 3 nights after Christmas. I was propped up in bed, hip screaming like a rusted hinge. watching the snow come down in thick, silent sheets over Maple Street. Clara had just finished changing the dressing on my incision, humming an old hymn under her breath, something about going home to glory. Her fingers were gentle, calloused from years of real work, not the manicured softness Robert was used to. She tucked the quilt around me, the wedding ring one, and said soft, "Miss Evelyn, you're healing faster than the doctors guessed. That's because your heart's too stubborn to quit." I smiled. I was already half in love with this girl. Then Robert stormed in without knocking, snow still clinging to the shoulders of his black cashmere coat. His face was carved from ice and fury. "Clara." One word, sharp enough to cut diamonds. She turned, calm as creek water. "Mr. Harper, I need to speak with you. In the study, now." He didn't wait, just turned and expected obedience the way mountains expect the sky to stay above them. Clara glanced at me, squeezed my hand once, and followed. I heard the study door slam so hard the windows rattled in their frames. I should have stayed in bed. Lord knows my hip begged me to. But grandmothers have ears that stretch through walls when their babies are hurting. I dragged myself into the wheelchair Robert had custom built. Heated seats. The fool rolled silent down the hall, and parked just outside the study door that never quite closed flush. And I listened while my grandson tried to destroy the first real thing that had walked into his life in 31 years. Robert's voice was lethal quiet at first. $243,000. Clara, that's what vanished from the household account between December 1st and yesterday. Care to explain? Quote, silence. Thick, trembling silence. Then Clara, steady as sunrise. "I moved it into the medical escrow you set up for Miss Evelyn's future care. The one your lawyers said was underfunded by exactly that amount after the last hospital bill. You were in Singapore. I emailed you the transfer confirmation on the 12th. You never opened it. I heard papers slam against mahogany." "Don't lie to me," Robert snarled. "Women have been stealing from me since I was 19 months old and inherited my first trust fund. Don't think for 1 second I'll let another pretty face." Quote, "Stop." Clara's voice cut through his like a hot knife through snow. Just one word, but it carried every ounce of mountain steel she was born with. "I am not your mother, Robert Harper. And I am damn sure not that red-headed viper who left you with a toddler and a broken heart. I have never taken a penny that wasn't earned with these two hands." Her voice cracked then. "Just once. You can accuse me of a lot of things. Being careless with Miss Evelyn's medicine, burning the oatmeal, singing too loud in the shower. But you will not accuse me of being a thief." Another silence. I could almost hear his heartbeat trying to hammer its way out of his chest. Then, quieter, raw. "Everyone leaves, Clara, or they take, usually both. It's the only thing I know for certain." I heard her footsteps. Soft, deliberate. I pictured her walking straight into the storm of him. "I'm still here," she said. 3 death threats from tabloids who want a photo of the billionaire's secret grandmother. 2 marriage proposals from your security team. 1 sprained ankle from carrying Miss Evelyn when the power went out and the elevator failed. I'm still here. And I'm still not leaving until she doesn't need me anymore. Or until you look me in the eye and tell me you want me gone because of who I am. Not because of what you're terrified I might do. I heard the creak of his leather chair as he sank into it like a man drowning on dry land. Get out, he whispered. No. Get out. I will, she said, voice trembling now. But first you listen. Robert Daniel Harper. I have watched you build walls so high you can't even see the sun anymore. I have watched you flinch every time Miss Evelyn says she loves you. Like love is a loaded gun. And I have watched you come in here every single night after she's asleep. Stand outside her door just to hear her breathe. Because you're so scared of losing the last person who stayed. A choked sound escaped him. Half sob. Half growl. I am not asking you to trust me tonight, Clara continued. Softer. I know trust got murdered in this family twice before I was even born. But I am asking you to stop punishing me for crimes I didn't commit. Because I am tired, Robert. I am so tired of being judged for a face I never wore and choices I never made. Then I heard it. The sound that broke this old woman's heart clean in two. The thud of knees hitting hardwood. Robert Harper, 31 years old, master of the universe, was on the floor again. I peeked through the crack in the door. He had his head bowed, fists clenched on his thighs, shoulders shaking with the kind of rage that has nowhere left to go but grief. Clara didn't move to touch him. She just stood there, tears rolling down her cheeks, arms wrapped around herself like she was holding her own heart in place. I hate you for making me feel this, he rasped. I hate you for being kind when I've spent my whole life making sure no one could get close enough to be kind. I hate that I check the monitors to see if you're still in the garage apartment every night. I hate that I notice what you're wearing and how you laugh at my terrible jokes. And the way you smell like vanilla and snow. He looked up then, eyes red, voice shredded. And I hate that I don't know how to believe you're real. Clara knelt slowly, right in front of him. Close enough to touch but not touching. Then don't believe me yet, she whispered. Just stop pushing me away long enough for me to prove it, one day at a time. That's all I'm asking. He stared at her for the longest minute of my long life. Then he did something I never thought I'd see again. He reached out, slow, like she might vanish if he moved too fast, and brushed a tear from her cheek with the back of one trembling finger. I don't know how, he said, voice broken open. I do, she answered. I'll teach you. I wheeled myself back to bed before they saw me, tears freezing on my own cheeks in the cold hallway. Because something had just shifted in that house on Maple Street. The fortress had a crack. And through it, for the first time in 30 years, a tiny sliver of light was slipping in. Reader, do you feel it? The slow burn starting low. The anger turning into something too hot to name? They didn't kiss that night. They didn't even touch again. But when Clara left the study 20 minutes later, Robert was still on the floor, staring at the place where she'd been like a man who'd just seen God and didn't know whether to fall on his knees or run. The war wasn't over. It was only just beginning. I turned 91 on a Saturday in early March. The kind of Ohio day that can't decide if it wants to be winter or spring. The doctors had finally let me out of the torture chamber they call physical therapy. And Robert, my beautiful, overprotective boy, decided the world needed to celebrate that I was still breathing. He threw the party at the old house on Maple Street, because he knew I hated those glass and steel venues downtown. He strung fairy lights through every tree, turned the backyard into a wonderland of heat lamps and white peonies flown in from Ecuador. Hired a string quartet, a jazz band, and a chef who'd once cooked for kings. 500 people were invited. I told him I only needed 5. He smiled that crooked smile and said, "Grandma, you deserve the world on a platter tonight." Clara spent 3 straight days helping him plan it. She hand-lettered the place cards, baked 6 apple pies because she said, "Billionaires don't know real dessert," and picked out the softest cashmere throw to drape over my wheelchair so I wouldn't catch a chill. Robert watched her do all of it with the kind of hunger that scared even me. He hadn't touched her since that night in the study 3 months ago. But Lord, the air between them crackled like a downed power line. Every time she walked into a room, his eyes tracked her like she was the only warm thing in a world made of ice. He found excuses to stand closer than necessary, to brush snow off her coat, to ask if she needed coffee even when she was holding a full cup. She let him, sometimes. Other times she stepped away, gentle but firm, like someone teaching a wild animal that hands could heal instead of hurt. The night of the party, Clara wore a simple emerald green dress she'd bought off the rack at a department store. Nothing designer, nothing flashy, but on her it looked like sin and salvation stitched together. Robert saw her come down the stairs and actually stopped breathing for 3 full seconds. I counted. Then Ethan Caldwell walked in. Ethan, 34, heir to a private equity empire, Robert's old roommate from MIT, and the only man on earth Robert ever called brother. Golden hair, Carolina blue eyes, charm sharp enough to slice bread. He took one look at Clara gliding through the crowd with a tray of champagne for the guests and went straight for her like a heat-seeking missile. I was parked by the fireplace, wrapped in my throw, watching the whole thing unfold like a slow-motion car crash. Ethan caught Clara's hand, kissed her knuckles the way European princes do in movies, and said loud enough for half the room to hear, "My God, Clara Monroe, you're the most beautiful thing in this zip code. Dance with me before I die of deprivation." Clara laughed, that mountain river laugh that made flowers open, and let him spin her onto the makeshift dance floor under the lights. Robert stood across the room holding a glass of bourbon he hadn't tasted. His knuckles went white around the crystal. I saw the dragon wake up. One song turned into 3. Ethan kept her close, whispering things that made her cheeks flush rose. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. He rested his hand at the small of her back like it belonged there. Robert's jaw looked sharp enough to cut steel. When Ethan finally dipped her low, theatrical and laughing, and the crowd applauded, Robert moved. He crossed the yard in 8 strides. People parting like the Red Sea before Moses on a very bad day. He didn't ask. He simply slid his arm around Clara's waist, pulled her out of Ethan's arms, and into his own body so fast she gasped. "She's done dancing," he said, voice low and lethal. Ethan lifted both hands, grinning like a man who'd just lit a fuse. Relax. Harp. I was just keeping her warm for you. Robert's eyes promised murder. Ethan's grin widened. Clara tried to step back, but Robert's arm turned to iron. Robert, she said, soft but warning. He ignored her, looked straight at Ethan and spoke in that boardroom voice that had crushed empires. Clara is not a toy you borrow when you're bored. Touch her again and I will dismantle everything you love, piece by piece, starting with that ridiculous yacht you named after your ego. The music kept playing, but the circle around them went dead silent. Ethan's smile never wavered, but something colder slid behind his eyes. Noted. Brother, he said. Then, to Clara, with a wink, offer stands. Darling, when you're tired of icebergs, come find the sun. He walked away. Clara wrenched herself out of Robert's grip hard enough that her wrist turned red where his fingers had been. What is wrong with you? She hissed. You don't own me, Robert Harper. You don't get to growl at people like a jealous dog. Quote, I watched him put his hands on you, he said. I can't breathe when another man touches you. Clara, you don't trust me, she whispered. No, I think you're the only thing in my life that isn't for sale. She placed her palm over his heart. I am not a prize. Robert, then stay, he begged. I'm not going anywhere, she said. But love isn't a fortress. It's a garden. Later I found them in the kitchen. Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. The dragon was learning how to breathe fire that warmed instead of burned. But dragons, even tamed ones, still have claws. And the next twist was going to draw blood. Some storms come with thunder you can hear 3 counties away. Others arrive so quiet you don't know you're drowning until the water is over your head. This one started with a phone call at 2:17 a.m. on a Wednesday in late April. I woke to the sound of Robert's bare feet running past my door. Then the low, frantic murmur of his voice in the hallway. I wheeled myself out as fast as my aching arms could manage and found him in the dark. Back against the wall, phone to his ear, face the color of ash. Which hospital? He was asking. I'm on my way. Tell them not to touch her until I get there. He saw me and the words died in his throat. Grandma, go back to bed. Quote, who is it, baby? Quote, he tried to answer and couldn't. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered on the hardwood like a gunshot. Clara had been in a car accident. She'd driven to Lexington after her shift to sit with her daddy. Lung cancer. Stage 4. The stubborn old miner refusing hospice. On the way home, black ice on I-75. A semi-truck. They'd life-flighted her to University of Cincinnati Medical Center. Robert was dressed and in the garage before I could get my robe tied. I made him take me with him. He didn't argue. He was shaking too hard to argue. We flew through the night in the Bentley. No driver. Robert doing 120 on the interstate. Tears running sideways across his temples into his hair. I'd never seen him cry before. Not real tears. Not like this. He kept saying the same thing. Over and over. Like a prayer and a curse. I didn't tell her. I didn't tell her. I didn't tell her. I reached across the console and gripped his arm. You'll tell her now, baby. You tell her the second she opens her eyes. They wouldn't let us into Trauma Bay 3 at first. Robert Harper. The man who buys hospitals when the coffee is bad stood helpless while a resident half his size blocked the door. Then Clara's surgeon came out, still in blood-spattered scrubs, and said the words that turned my grandson into a feral thing. Multiple fractures. Internal bleeding. We've stabilized her, but the next 24 hours are critical. She's asking for someone named Robert. He didn't wait for permission. He shoved past doctors, past security, until he found her. I followed as far as the glass window. Clara was almost unrecognizable, face swollen, tubes everywhere, blood crusted in her hair. But her eyes, those river water eyes, were open, searching. Robert fell to his knees beside the bed, gathered her broken hand like it was made of spun glass, and pressed it to his mouth. "I'm here, Angel. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You stay with me. Do you hear me? You stay." She tried to smile. It looked like it hurt. "Told you. I wasn't leaving," she rasped through the oxygen mask. He made a sound I hope never to hear again. Half sob, half scream. Buried his face against her side and cried like the little boy who once watched his mother drive away. I stood outside that glass for 12 hours straight, refusing the chair they brought, refusing food, refusing everything but the sight of my grandson holding the hand of the only woman who had ever fought her way past his walls. At hour 13, her heart stopped. Code blue. Crash cart. Paddles. I watched them shock her 3 times. I watched Robert try to crawl onto the bed with her, screaming her name until 2 orderlies dragged him back. I watched the line on the monitor go flat. And then, miracle of miracles, I watched it blip again. 1 beat, 2, a rhythm. The doctor looked up, stunned. "She's back." Robert collapsed on the floor right there in the trauma bay, forehead pressed to the cold tile, whispering, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," to whatever God had finally decided to listen. They moved her to surgical ICU, sedated her deep, told us to pray. Robert didn't leave. He slept upright in a plastic chair, still holding her hand. When the nurses tried to make him eat, he stared until they backed away. On the 5th day they brought her up slowly from the drugs. She opened her eyes, looked straight at him, and croaked the first full sentence she'd managed since the crash. "You look like hell, billionaire." He laughed so hard he cried again. That night, when the ICU finally went quiet and the nurses pretended not to notice he was in the bed with her, he laid his head on her shoulder, careful of every wire and tube, and said the words he'd never said to any living soul except me. "I love you, Clara Elizabeth Monroe. I love you so much it's been killing me for months. I was just too scared to die first, but I'm not scared anymore. Marry me, not because I'm rich or broken or terrified of losing you, but because you are my home. Please, Angel, marry me." She was quiet so long I thought the heart monitor had flatlined again. Then she lifted her good hand, the one with the IV and bruises blooming purple, and threaded her fingers through his hair. "I will," she whispered, "but only if you promise me one thing. Anything. Name it. Never again call me Angel when you're mad. I'm a coal miner's daughter. We answer better to Hellcat." He laughed through fresh tears and kissed her like a man who'd been pulled back from the edge of the abyss. 2 weeks later they wheeled me into her regular room with a tiny velvet box hidden in my lap. Robert got down on one knee beside her hospital bed, cast on her leg, stitches in her forehead, looking like a warrior queen who'd just won a war. He opened the box. Inside was not some 10-carat monstrosity. It was my own engagement ring. The one my Robert had given me in 1953. A modest quarter-carat diamond set in rose gold, worn thin from 70 years of love and dishwater and prayer. I had it reset on a new band, he said, voice rough, because the best love this family ever had started with this ring. I want ours to continue it. Clara stared at it, then at him, then at me. I was crying so hard my glasses fogged. She held out her left hand, the one without the IV, and let him slide it on. It fits, she breathed. It was always meant to, I told her. She looked at Robert then, eyes shining brighter than any diamond ever could. Yes, she said, 1,000 times yes. He kissed her, careful, reverent, like she was the first sunrise after 40 days of night. And somewhere, I swear on every star in the Ohio sky, I felt my Matthew and my Daniel smiling down. Reader, some love stories are quiet. This one roared through our lives like a freight train made of grace. But even grace has one more test to give. Because Clara's daddy was dying 3 hours away, and some promises cannot be broken, even for billionaires. And where Robert Harper finally understands the difference between owning the world and belonging to someone in it. Clara's daddy, Jonah Monroe, was 63 years old and looked 90. Black lung had eaten him hollow from the inside out. He'd refused the oxygen tank for years because real men don't breathe through tubes. By the time Clara came home from the hospital, he was breathing through tubes and hating every second of it. She moved back to Harlan County the week she got the walking cast off her leg. Not forever. Just until the end. Robert offered private jets, the best pulmonologists in the country, a lung transplant team on standby, a hospital wing named after the man if he'd only come to Cincinnati. Jonah Monroe looked Robert dead in the eye from his sagging recliner in a double-wide trailer with plastic over the windows and said, "Son, the only thing I want from you is to love my girl when I'm gone. Everything else is noise." Robert swallowed every arrogant, frightened word he wanted to say and answered, "Yes, sir. I will love her every day for the rest of my life." Jonah nodded once, coughed until blood speckled the tissue, and said, "Then get out of my house and let me die in peace with my daughter." Clara stayed. Robert came every single weekend. Friday night he would land the helicopter on the high school football field. Caused a near riot the first time. Walk the 3 miles to the trailer because the road was too narrow for his car. And spend 2 days sitting on a plastic lawn chair, holding Clara's hand while she held her daddy's. He learned how to empty bedside commodes. He learned how to change morphine patches. He learned that love sometimes smells like sickness and pine sol and cornbread burning because Clara forgot it in the oven while she cried over a man who used to carry her on his shoulders to the creek. He never complained, not once. At night, when Jonah finally slept, Clara and Robert would sit on the front steps under stars so bright they hurt your eyes. He'd pull her into his lap, careful of her healing ribs. And they'd talk in whispers about everything and nothing. One night in July, the air thick as molasses, fireflies blinking slow, she asked him the question that had been eating her alive. Robert, when he's gone, are you still sure? Because I come with a dying daddy, a mama buried too young, cousins who think napkins are for fancy people, and a holler that will never understand why I'd marry a man who owns half of Ohio. I'm not the girl in the emerald dress anymore. I'm the girl who smells like hospital soap and grief. Are you sure? Quote, he was quiet so long she started shaking. Then he took the little rose gold ring off her finger, turned it so the worn diamond caught the moonlight, and slid it back on, slower than the first time. Clara Monroe, he said, voice rough from too many nights with too little sleep. I have spent 31 years being sure about exactly two things. That people leave, and that money keeps them from leaving too fast. You have spent the last 6 months proving both of those things wrong. I am not sure about tomorrow. I am not sure about next year. I am sure about you. I am sure that if you let me, I will sit on this porch every weekend for the rest of my life. Or until you get tired of me. I am sure that I love you when you're laughing and when you're crying and when you're covered in your daddy's blood because you held him while he coughed his lungs up. I am sure, Clara, I have never been more sure of anything. She cried then, the ugly kind, face crumpled against his neck, soaking his shirt. He just held her and rocked. Same way I once rocked him when he was 19 months old and the world had already taught him. Goodbye. Jonah Monroe died on a Sunday morning in August, right at sunrise. Clara was holding one hand, Robert the other. The hospice nurse said he waited until Clara whispered, "It's okay, Daddy. I'm not alone anymore. I've got someone who stays." Then he looked at Robert, managed the ghost of a smile, and said, "Take care of my baby, boy." Robert answered, "With everything I am, sir." Jonah closed his eyes, took one last rattling breath, and slipped away peaceful as morning mist. They buried him 2 days later on the ridge behind the trailer. Next to Clara's mama, half the county came, miners in their Sunday overalls, women with casseroles and quilts, children running between the graves like it was a picnic. Robert stood behind Clara the whole time, arms wrapped around her waist to hold her up when her knees gave out. He didn't try to fix anything. He didn't offer money or private jets or anything but his own body as a shield against the wind. When they lowered the simple pine box, Jonah had refused anything fancier. Clara sank to the ground and laid her cheek on the fresh dirt like she could still feel him under there. Robert knelt beside her, not caring that his $1,000 suit was ruined, and laid his hand over hers on the grave. "I brought something," he said quietly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the stuffed giraffe, the one little Robert had clung to when his own mother left. The one big Robert had slept with through nightmares until he was 15. Threadbare, one eye missing, ear chewed off by time and grief. He placed it gently on the mound of red clay. "For you, sir," he said to the earth. "So you'll always have a piece of the little boy who needed Clara before he even met her. And so you know I understand what it means to be a father who would give anything to keep his child from hurting." Clara turned into his arms and sobbed until there was nothing left but hiccups and the smell of turned earth. Later, back at the trailer, the women tried to shoo Robert out of the kitchen the way mountain women do when death has visited. He refused to leave Clara's side. He stood at the sink washing dishes beside her while cousins whispered about that rich city boy who ain't too proud to scrub pots. One old woman, Jonah's sister Ruth, watched him dry a cast iron skillet with the same concentration he once used to close 9-figure deals, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Girl, you better marry that one before somebody else figures out what you got." Clara looked at Robert, dishwater dripping from his rolled-up sleeves, eyes red from crying with her instead of for her, and answered, "Yes, ma'am, I intend to." That night, under the same stars that had watched her daddy leave, Clara and Robert sat on the hood of his rental truck. He'd finally traded the Bentley for something that could handle gravel roads. She leaned her head on his shoulder and asked, when? Quote, he knew what she meant. "Tomorrow," he said. "Next week. Next year. Whenever you're ready. I'm not going anywhere, Clara. I've already moved heaven and earth to prove it. Now I just get to love you until you believe it." She turned, kissed him slow and sweet and tasting of salt and cornbread and forever, and whispered against his mouth, "Take me home, Robert Harper. Take me back to Maple Street. I'm ready to start the rest of our lives." Reader, have you ever seen a man learn that love isn't about owning the world? It's about giving the world a way to sit on a porch in overalls and hold the woman you love while she buries her daddy. That was the moment Robert Harper finally became the man his father and grandfather always prayed he'd grow into. But one more storm was coming. The kind that comes dressed in lipstick and regret, because some ghosts don't stay buried. And one of them was about to walk back through our door wearing 5-inch heels and a smile sharp as betrayal. This is where the past tries to steal the future, and where love finally roars loud enough to scare even the devils away. September came in hot and mean. The kind of Ohio heat that makes dogs lie flat on porches and old women remember every sin they ever committed. Clara and Robert had set the wedding for the first Saturday in October. Small, just family and the people who'd loved us through the fire. Maple Street backyard, white tent, peonies again. Because Clara said they were her mama's favorite, I was going to wear the same navy dress I'd worn to Matthew's wedding. Only this time I'd be smiling for real. Everything felt fragile and perfect. Like the moment before you blow out birthday candles when you still believe wishes come true. Then the devil knocked on our door wearing a cream silk dress and a smile that could slice bread. Lauren Whitmore Harper, now Lauren Whitmore Langley Kane or some other rich man's last name, stepped out of a white Rolls-Royce Phantom in front of our house on a Thursday afternoon when the cicadas were screaming like Judgment Day. She hadn't aged so much as been preserved. 38 going on 28, lips plumped, skin stretched, hair that cost more per inch than most folks' rent. She carried a Hermes bag and a lie the size of Texas. I saw her from the porch before she saw me. My heart stopped, then started again with the old familiar ache. She walked up the steps like she still belonged here, red soles flashing like fresh blood. "Evelyn," she cooed. voice dripping honey over broken glass. You look exactly the same. I gripped my cane so hard the wood groaned. State your business, Lauren, or get off my property before I call the police for trespassing. She laughed. That same champagne laugh that once fooled my grandson into believing she had a soul. I just want to see my son, she said, eyes wide and wet like a soap opera actress. I heard he's getting married. A mother should be there for her only child's wedding. The screen door slammed behind me. Clara stepped out, Robert right behind her, his hand on the small of her back like a shield. Lauren's gaze snapped to them. And for one heartbeat the mask slipped. Jealousy, pure and ugly, flashed across her face when she saw Clara. Cast gone now, sun-kissed and whole and radiant in a simple sundress. Then the mask slid back. Robert, baby, she said, opening her arms, look at you. All grown up and so handsome. Robert didn't move. He stared at her like she was a ghost that had finally come to collect. Clara's fingers found his, threaded tight. Lauren's arms dropped. I know I don't deserve a warm welcome, she began. Tears already gathering. Oscar-worthy. I was young. I was scared. I made terrible mistakes. Quote, you left a 19-month-old baby on a marble floor, Robert said. Voice flat and cold as a tombstone. You left my father to die of a broken heart. Don't talk to me about mistakes. You made choices. Lauren flinched. But she was a performer who'd played tougher rooms. I was 29. Robert. I wasn't ready to be buried alive in suburbia. I've spent every day since regretting. Quote, stop. Clara's voice cut through the air like a church bell. She stepped forward, placing herself between Lauren and Robert the way you step between a child and a snake. You don't get to stand on this porch and rewrite history with tears you practiced in a mirror. Clara said, soft but fierce. I've held that little boy's nightmares in my hands. I've wiped his tears when he woke up asking why his mommy didn't love him enough to stay. You don't get to swoop in now because the cameras love a redemption arc. Lauren's eyes narrowed. And who are you? She asked. Venom sweet as syrup. The new gold digger? Don't kid yourself, honey. He'll tire of the mountain girl act the way he tires of everything. Robert moved so fast I barely saw it. 1 second he was behind Clara. The next he was nose to nose with the woman who'd destroyed 2 generations of Harper men. Get off my property. Each word carved from ice and rage. Lauren didn't back down. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick cream envelope sealed with gold wax. My wedding invitation came back unopened, she said. I'm here to deliver it personally. And to give you this. She held out a second envelope. Smaller. Addressed in handwriting I hadn't seen in 11 years. Robert froze. It's from your father, Lauren whispered. He wrote it the week before he died. My lawyer kept it all these years. I think you should read it. Clara's hand tightened on his until her knuckles went white. Robert took the envelope with fingers that trembled like leaves in a storm. Lauren smiled, small and cruel. I'll be at the St. Regis if you want to talk. Sweetheart, mothers and sons should never be strangers. She turned, hips swaying, and walked back to her roles like she hadn't just dropped a bomb in the middle of our lives. The second the car disappeared, Robert's knees buckled. He sat down hard on the porch steps, envelope clutched to his chest, staring at nothing. Clara knelt in front of him, cupped his face. "Look at me," she said. He couldn't. "Robert Daniel Harper, you look at me right now." His eyes lifted, shattered. "That letter," he rasped. "What if he hated me? What if he blamed me for you leaving? What if the last thing my father ever wrote was that I wasn't enough to make you stay?" Quote. Clara took the envelope from his shaking hands, opened it with steady fingers, and began to read aloud. Right there on the porch while the cicadas screamed and the sun bled out across the sky. "My dearest son, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger for you. I tried. God knows I tried. But I need you to hear this from me. Not from the silence I left behind. You were always enough. You were the best thing I ever did. Every breath I took after your mother left was for you. I wish I could see the man you've become. I hope you're happy. I hope someone loves you the way you deserve. Fierce and forever. The way you always loved me. Don't let my broken heart become yours. Love anyway. Risk it. Fall. Because you, Robert Daniel Harper, are the strongest person I've ever known. I love you bigger than the sky. See you on the other side. Buddy. Dad." Clara's voice broke on the last line. Robert made a sound like his soul was being torn out through his throat and pulled her into his lap, burying his face in her neck, sobbing like the 19-month-old boy who'd never been allowed to finish crying. I sat down beside them, old bones creaking, and wrapped my arms around both of them. We stayed there until the stars came out. 3 generations and one brand new family, holding each other while the past finally let go. Later, when Robert could speak again, he took the letter, folded it gently, and slipped it into Clara's hand. "Will you keep this for me?" he asked. "In the box with Granddaddy's war medals and the giraffe and the quilt squares. So our children know where they came from, and where they never have to go back to." Quote. Clara kissed him, soft and slow. "I will guard it with my life," she promised. Then she looked at the cream invitation Lauren had left on the porch rail, picked it up, and without a word tore it into 100 pieces that fluttered down like white butterflies. "She's not coming," Clara said simply. "No," Robert agreed. "She's not." He stood, lifted Clara into his arms like she weighed nothing, and carried her inside. I followed slow, smiling through tears. Because some ghosts only have power when you leave the door open. We had just slammed it shut and thrown away the key. And oh, darlin', you've never seen a happier day in your whole life. The first Saturday in October broke clear and gold. The kind of Ohio autumn morning when the air smells like apples and forgiveness. Maple Street was closed from one end to the other. White tents bloomed across every lawn like someone had scattered giant peonies from heaven. Thousands of fairy lights were already glowing though it was only 10 o'clock. Because Robert said the day should feel lit from the inside out. I sat on the front porch in my navy dress. The same one. Yes. But Clara had taken it to a seamstress in Lexington who let the waist out and replaced the old buttons with tiny pearls. My hair was done up with late-blooming white roses from the bush my own Robert planted the year Daniel was born. I had a new cane. Rosewood. Engraved along the shaft. Still standing. EH 2045. Robert gave it to me the night before with tears in his eyes and said, "For the strongest woman I've ever known." At 11:47 a.m. the string quartet in the backyard began Pachelbel's canon. Soft as a heartbeat. And the world went still. Clara stepped out of the house. Lord have mercy. She wore my mother's wedding dress. The one I'd worn in 1954. Ivory lace so old it had turned the color of fresh cream. Clara and I had spent 3 months restoring it together. New silk lining. Hand-stitched pearl buttons down the back. The original veil mended with lace from her own mama's going-away dress. The skirt fell in soft waves. And the veil floated behind her like morning mist over the holler. But it wasn't the dress that stole every breath in a 5-mile radius. It was the way she looked at Robert. He was waiting under the arbor his granddaddy built the year I carried Daniel. White climbing roses everywhere. The same ones that had watched 3 generations of Harper men promise forever. Robert wore a simple black tuxedo. No tie. Collar open the way Clara likes it. His hands were shaking so hard the minister later told me he thought the boy might drop the ring. When Clara reached the end of the aisle, walking slow because her legs still ached some days, Robert stepped forward and met her halfway. He didn't wait for anyone's permission. He simply took both her hands, brought them to his mouth, and kissed her knuckles like he was greeting a queen and begging a saint all at once. The minister was a woman from Clara's daddy's little church in Harlan County. Gray-haired, no nonsense, voice like warm molasses. She smiled at the two of them and said, loud enough for every soul to hear, "Usually I ask who gives this woman. Today I'm gonna ask something different. Who kept this woman through every storm this world threw at her?" Quote, "Every person there, 500 at least, answered in one voice. He did." Robert's eyes filled so fast the tears spilled over before he could stop them. The minister nodded, satisfied. "Then let's get these two married before the Lord changes his mind and keeps them for himself." There were no long readings. No poems, just vows they wrote themselves. Spoken raw and shaking. Robert went first. Clara Elizabeth Monroe. "I spent 31 years learning how to survive losing people. Then you walked in with your river water eyes and your stubborn heart and taught me how to live by staying. I promise you my yesterdays. All the broken ones. And every tomorrow I'm given. I promise to sit on porches in Harlan County and in penthouses in New York and never once complain about the gravel roads or the traffic. I promise to love you when you burn the cornbread and when you dance in the kitchen in nothing but my shirt. I promise to hold your hand at every grave we ever have to visit, and to build you new gardens everywhere we go. You are my home, my safe place, my miracle. I will love you until my last breath, and then I'll love you some more from the other side. This is my vow, always." Clara had to wait almost a full minute before she could speak. When she did, her voice rang clear as a bell across the whole neighborhood. "Robert Daniel Harper, you once told me love felt like a loaded gun to you. I promised I'd teach you it could be open hands instead. Today I'm making my promise back. I will hold your past gently. I will carry your pain when it gets too heavy. I will never walk out that door without coming back through it. I will love you on the days you feel unbreakable and on the days you feel like the little boy clutching a giraffe again. You are the safest place I have ever known. And I will spend the rest of my life proving you are safe with me too. I love you bigger than these Ohio skies and deeper than any Kentucky holler. Forever is too short. I'll love you after that. The minister didn't even try to stop the tears rolling down her own cheeks. Rings, she said, voice cracking. Robert slid my rose gold band, now joined with a new plain gold one, onto Clara's finger. Clara slid a matching gold band onto his. Then the minister raised both hands to heaven and shouted, "By the power vested in me by the state of Ohio and a whole lot of answered prayers, I pronounce you husband and wife. Robert, you may now kiss your bride. And Lord help anybody who tries to stop you." Quote, he didn't wait. He cupped Clara's face like she was made of light and kissed her so deep and tender the entire backyard erupted in whoops and applause and not a few grown men crying like babies. When they finally broke apart, foreheads still touching, Robert whispered against her mouth, loud enough for the microphone to catch, "Welcome home, Mrs. Harper." Clara laughed through happy tears and answered, "Took you long enough to bring me here, Mr. Harper." The reception went on until the stars burned out. There was barbecue and cornbread and apple pie and a bluegrass band that had half the billionaires two-stepping with coal miners' daughters. Robert danced with me first, slow and careful, my head on his shoulder like I used to hold him when he was small. Then he handed me off to Clara's Uncle Boone, who spun me until I was dizzy and laughing like a girl again. At midnight, when the last guest had gone and the tents glowed soft in the dark, Robert carried me inside. Yes, carried his 91-year-old grandmother like I weighed nothing, and tucked me into bed. Clara followed with a slice of wedding cake and a glass of milk, the way I used to do for them when they were children staying up late. Robert kissed my forehead. "Thank you, Grandma," he whispered, "for never leaving, for teaching me how to stay." I touched his cheek. Then Clara's. "Take care of each other," I told them. "Love each other loud enough that every ghost in this house finally knows it's time to rest." They promised. I fell asleep to the sound of them laughing in the hallway. Young and free and whole. Reader, I wish you could have seen it. The boy who once thought love was a one-way road to pain married the woman who taught him it could be a circle that never ends. And somewhere, I know 2 Harper men and 1 stubborn coal miner were clapping and hollering louder than anybody. Under those peonies. The epilogue that comes 20 years later. When I'm long gone and the story keeps growing anyway. They laid me to rest on a Tuesday in October. 20 years to the day after Robert and Clara said their vows under the same arbor. I was 99 years and 11 months old, close enough to 100 that the Lord let me round up. The whole street closed again. Same white tents. Same peonies. Only this time they were grown from cuttings Clara took the morning I passed peaceful in my sleep. Wedding ring quilt pulled to my chin. Smile still on my face. The cemetery on Salem Road was too full of Harpers now for another plot. So they buried me in the backyard I loved, right under the climbing roses. with a simple stone that reads, Evelyn Harper, 1914 to 2065. She stayed. Robert, 51 now, silver at the temples but still tall and straight as the day he carried Clara over the threshold. Stood over my grave with his arm around his wife. Clara's hair had gone the color of moonlit river water, but her eyes hadn't changed a bit. 5 children stood with them. 5. Daniel Jonah, 19. Already accepted to MIT on a scholarship he earned himself. Not his daddy's name. Evelyn Ruth, 17. Fierce and freckled, plays fiddle like the mountains taught her. The twins, Matthew Robert and Clara Grace, 14. Inseparable, trouble with hearts of gold. And little Jonah Boone, 8. Missing 2 front teeth. Clutching the same threadbare giraffe that has been patched and loved by 3 generations. They all wore navy and ivory, same colors as the weddings that started and ended on this ground. Clara spoke first, voice steady as ever. She used to say love was a circle, she told the crowd of hundreds. Friends, employees, strangers who just wanted to pay respects to the woman who raised a billionaire with nothing but cornbread and stubborn hope. Today we close the circle she started when she refused to let a broken little boy believe he was unlovable. Then Robert stepped forward, laid a single white peony on my stone, and read the letter I left for them. The one I wrote the week before I went to sleep for the last time. My dearest loves, if you're reading this, I finally got to dance with my Robert again. And your granddaddy Daniel is probably arguing with Jonah Monroe about who gets to push me on the swing first. Thank you for letting an old woman live long enough to see the story come right. Robert, my sweet boy, you kept every promise you ever made me. You turned your pain into shelter for the whole world. Be proud. Rest sometimes. Love loud. The way I taught you. Clara, my daughter, you were the answer to prayers I stopped daring to pray. Thank you for teaching my grandson that hands can hold instead of hurt. Keep him honest. Keep him laughing. Burn the cornbread every once in a while just to watch him smile. To my great-grandchildren, listen close. People will leave, hearts will break, but if you love fierce and stay stubborn, the circle never breaks. I'm not gone. I'm the roses climbing the arbor. I'm the wind in the maple trees. I'm every story you tell about the old lady who refused to let love loose. I love you bigger than the sky. See you when the circle brings you home. Grandma Evelyn. When Robert finished, his voice cracked on the last line, and the 5 children laid 5 white peonies on my grave, one from each decade I'd watched them grow. Then little Jonah Boone, 8 years old, fearless as his namesake, stepped forward, stood on tiptoe, and spoke straight to the stone like I could hear him. Grandma, he said, clear as a bell, thank you for staying. We're staying too, all of us, forever. And every person there, rich and poor, city and country, blood and chosen, answered in one voice. Forever. Robert and Clara still live in the house on Maple Street. They added on a music room, a library, a kitchen big enough for Sunday dinners that never end. But the heart of it is unchanged. The wedding ring quilt is on their bed now. The giraffe sits on a shelf where every child who visits can see the proof that love can be mended. Over and over. They still dance in the kitchen. They still sit on porches in Harlan County every Father's Day to remember the men who taught them what staying means. And every October 4th, no matter where they are in the world, they come home, light the fairy lights, and renew their vows under the roses that refuse to die. Because some love stories don't end when the last page turns. They just keep blooming. Reader, this is where I hand the story to you. Tell me, yes, you, reading these words with tears or a smile or both, where are you from? Have you ever been left? Or been the one who stayed? Has love ever found you when you'd stopped believing it could? Put it in the comments below. Your town, your piece of the circle. Because this story never belonged only to the Harpers on Maple Street. It belongs to every single soul who ever chose to stay when walking away would have been easier. Type your name, your city, your promise, however small or huge. I'll be watching from the roses. And I'll be smiling. The circle keeps growing. Forever.